solidarity campaign for the freedom for Öcalan, thinking about the relationship between what's happening in Turkey and what's happening in this country, the broader crisis of capitalist modernity as it's playing itself out. So lots of issues on the table. Let's open it up for some conversation with the public here.
We were privileged enough to meet Leyla Guven. Very, very privileged. But when we met Leyla, she was having a terrible day. To us, she looked like she would die within that week. And she's such a strong woman. She's day 173 now. And I think we met her on day 151. Amazing. And we talked to her daughter, Sabiha, who is equally strong, but you could see the pain in her face. And Sabiha told us that Leyla was happy. She thought the results could have been better, but she was happy especially about the results in Ankara and Istanbul. But she was saying how Leyla feels responsible for all of the hunger strikers, because Leyla started this hunger strike alone, and now thousands have followed her, and she feels this great, great responsibility for their lives. And we also met 3 Ahmed hunger strikers. Dersim Dar, she's 23 years old. I think she's the youngest MP in Turkey. Amazing. And she was on day 20-something of her hunger strike. And she's hunger striking in the HDP offices with Tayyip Temel and Murat Sarasac. And they're both MPs for Van. Most of you probably know that Sur was destroyed late 2015, early 2016 by the Turkish military. And I hadn't been since that had happened. So I was really shocked by what I saw. I think 2/3 of Sur now is destroyed. Most of it has new builds, really ugly new builds in. It was quite unbelievable to see, actually. I took a lot of photos. I'll try and write an article about it. And also there's 2 villages on the outside of the old city walls of Ahmed, which are also going to be destroyed very soon, in order for Turkey to build a people's garden. Whatever that means, a people's garden. So this destruction of Sur, this displacement, ethnic cleansing, is still happening.
As you all know, Turkey is the biggest jailer of journalists in the world. They call it an open prison for journalists. Many media organisations have been shut down. I've visited many of them and have some, tales of absolute horror. This is just for reporting the news. This isn't, they're not doing anything other than reporting news on workers' issues, on the Kurdish struggle, basic kind of news stories, and facing routine harassment. One person in Van who had been taken into police custody 24 times in 2 years. And this is kind of normal routine stuff. It's happened to me every time I've been inside Turkey. I've been surrounded at gunpoint. They threatened to take me into the mountains and shoot me in Cizre when they tried to block me from entering there to report the news on the basement fires, which I managed to report. And we should be looking towards building support in the working class organisations, because that's really where power lies, I think. And we have to be building in the trade union movement, because the trade union movement are the mass organisations of workers in this country, and they can put pressure on the opposition. They can put pressure on the government. I think there has to be a political solution to this. There's not a legal solution. I think we have international law, which obviously is one strand, and it's an important strand to pursue. But we're not going to be gifted. Öcalan's freedom is not going to be gifted by the Council of Europe. It's not going to be gifted by the European Union. It's not going to be gifted by the United Nations. These are all imperialist forces that were actually specifically designed to entrench the capitalist system. This is their mode. That's their goal. That's their modus operandi. So we can't appeal to them, I don't think. I mean, we could raise the issues with them, but I'm not sure that the answer lies in these institutions. I think that they have a vested interest in maintaining the system and in maintaining Erdogan in power and maintaining dictatorial regime. As for your meeting with Amnesty, I mean, Wow, good luck with that. I mean, I have a view of Amnesty that, as Mark called them, a human rights organisation. Unfortunately, the history of Amnesty is not a good one. They've tailed imperialism, since pretty much since their existence. That most famously, and this is one that we should keep mentioning because it's an embarrassment to them, is that they refused to campaign for Nelson Mandela. They refused to grant him the status of a prisoner of conscience because he refused to renounce the armed struggle. Now, they pick and choose who they support. But we could also ask them, when you're there, ask them this question. Ask them if they feel responsible for helping propel Erdogan to power. In 1998, when Erdogan was the mayor of Istanbul, he was arrested, he was sent to prison for reading out a poem that was banned in Turkey at the time, but a poem that essentially called for Islamist rule in the country. And they campaigned for his release. They gave him the status of a prisoner of conscience. So, are they responsible? Are they partly responsible for propelling him to power? He knew when he read out that poem he was going to prison. That was it. It was a deliberate ploy to make himself a martyr. And of course that, and the campaign from organisations like Amnesty International helped give him that veneer of respectability. Not only within Turkey, give him that prestige and raise his profile, but on a global stage as well, as some kind of martyr to free speech. 17 years or however long later and however long he's been in power, thousands of people have been sent to prison. Thousands of people have been killed under his rule. And Amnesty, have they lifted a finger for those people? We have the absurdity, we've been covering this in the Morning Star, the absurd situation where a human rights organisation were denying that there were hunger strikes in Turkish prisons. As though Leyla Guven is a figment of our imagination. Okay, she's not in prison now. She's under, but she's on hunger strike. She was on hunger strike in prison. 7,000 people are on hunger strike in Turkish prisons at the moment.
Whatever you think about the tactic of a hunger strike and whatever ideas that you have about hunger striking, it's these people have made this decision. I've been with Imam Chish down in Wales for a period of about 4 weeks and had an opportunity to, in the wee hours of the morning to have a really deep conversation with him. And I can assure you that, he made this choice, and he has taken everything into consideration. And he is prepared to die for this demand of breaking the isolation of Abdullah Öcalan and to get regular visits onto Imrali Island. So, and all our friends, it seems, that this hunger strike, we've known hunger strikes before by the Kurdish movement, that this hunger strike is different in that respect, that this is historical and people, are prepared to go all the way. Today we found there's an announcement of 15 hunger strikers have moved on to a death fast. PKK and PJAK prisoners in Turkish prisons have moved on to a death fast, which means that they will no longer be taking B1 and B12 vitamins. The effect that will have on their bodies will mean that that they will die sooner, that they won't be able to last as long. Imam, he's lost 28 kilograms. His white blood cells have dropped to such a degree that he's open to infections. His heart rate has really gone to dangerously low levels. And he is in a very critical situation. I would argue that the hunger strikers have already won in a very major way, and that being that more solidarity work, more support has been raised for the Kurdish issue, I would suggest in the past 170 days than has been done in the past 10 years, basically. Especially the work in Wales has been just absolutely awesome, and it's just been inspiring in the extreme. There's a huge amount of very, very good activists down in Wales who are doing incredibly good work down there, and managed to get a motion through the Welsh Assembly to put pressure on the Committee for the Prevention of Torture, and that's just a tiny aspect. Sinn Féin led with very, very good work and went and visited Leyla Guven. The work is spreading northwards, and the Scottish TUC has just taken, has passed a motion about it. And there's lots and lots of work that's being done by lots of people in this room and outside. But unfortunately, it's not enough. The hunger strike, which is now entering into a very, very critical stage, people are going to start dying soon. And I would urge everybody, whatever your own views on the hunger strike, but if you are in solidarity with the Kurdish people, and you agree that Öcalan is the central person who's going to be the main person to negotiate a peaceful political resolution to the Kurdish issue, and I think we're all agreed on that. So it's incredibly important. So I think I would urge every single person to take responsibility for doing something, and to raise support and to raise awareness about the central demand of the hunger strikers, which is to get regular legal visits to Abdullah Öcalan on İmralı Island.
Turkey it's described as an electoral authoritarian country, which is to say that it still has fairly regular elections, and in some ways the ballot process itself is relatively fair compared to some places that you can think of. But also in the background, the majority of state institutions, the judiciary, the media, press, TV stations and so on, are more or less under the thumb of the ruling party and its leader, Tayyip Erdogan. So it's electoral, but it can't be described as a democracy. It's an authoritarian electoral system. So despite all of these serious obstacles that stand in the way of any opposition party in a Turkish election, the actual results of these elections show that there are still some vestiges of democracy left hanging in Turkey. The AKP was the most popular party in Karakoçan, which is where we were stationed for our observations, and surprisingly also in Şırnak, which has been regarded as one of the kind of central towns in the Kurdish movement. And I've been to Şırnak before, actually. I went there in 2014 to spend a few weeks in a Yazidi refugee camp. I was there for 3 weeks, living in Şırnak. And it was a place that was under the thumb, true enough, but it was also a beautiful town. And if you look at the pictures of Şırnak today, and if you read the UN reports about what's happened in Şırnak, you'll find it described as an empty moonscape and a vast parking lot. So the fact that the AKP was able to secure something of a local victory in Şırnak has been attributed to a number of things, one of which is the fact that the local population has been forced to flee from their homes and have been replaced with police and with a military presence. And those people tend to vote for Erdogan and for the AKP. That's part of it. The other part is that the party in control at the national level, of course, is the AKP. And they're the ones who are promising, whether they'll do it or not is a different question, but they're promising to make at least some attempt to rebuild what they've destroyed in Şırnak. And for many people, according to a report in Middle East Eye, an online news outlet, for many local people who still remain in Şırnak, the worry is if you don't vote the right way, if you don't vote for the ruling party, then it may be very difficult for you to in fact obtain one of these homes that's being built. So this is kind of the mafia version of an electoral process, if you like. And here, very briefly to end, I should mention the importance of Mr. Öcalan. His centrality to the Kurdish movement in Turkey and elsewhere is undeniable, and the route to peace in Turkey clearly runs through his prisoned island of İmralı. So the courageous stand taken by HDP MPs and others, including Leyla Guven and all the other hunger strikers in Turkey, in Strasbourg and elsewhere, is vitally important, and it deserves our full-throated support and solidarity.
One of my questions is what do we do with that reality of our government? How do we put that pressure on the government? How do we make our campaigning strategic, and thinking about what we can achieve and what is achievable in terms of what we're doing here and what's achievable in terms of what people on the ground think that we can do? And when we've got a government that's more concerned with arms deals to Turkey and selling more weapons to bomb Kurdish communities with, it's very difficult to see how they're suddenly going to come around and start putting pressure on him to be a nicer leader, for want of a better word. It doesn't seem sort of very realistic to the situation that we have. So I'd like to think sort of strategically about how we do that and where the money is and where we can challenge that power of capital that's feeding his regime as well. Finding ways of explaining that relevance to people who aren't connected with the movement, about why it's important and why it's so important to defend what's happening, why the ideas are so important, why what they've achieved and is being achieved needs defending, why we can take inspiration from democratic confederalism, from the women's movement.
Obviously, Leyla Güven and the struggle of the hunger strikes is very key at the moment and was a key thing during the elections. Well, the original reason why Leyla was in prison was because she was protesting against the illegal fascist colonial invasion of Afrin. So it really shows how these things are all inextricable from each other. And so I'd just like to end then by saying that this inextricability comes down, as Thomas again put it, to one person on the island in Imrale. This person is the key to unlocking this apparently inextricable set of contradictions, both in the practical sense of democratic confederalism, democratic nation as the solution, but also in a very meaningful sense, as Steve said, the parallel with the Sinn Féin and IRA peace negotiations, figures like Adams and McGuinness being able to bring movements and armed struggle groups to the negotiating process and achieve a meaningful and lasting peace. Also figures like Nelson Mandela. The figure of Abdullah Öcalan has been shown once again to be absolutely essential to any meaningful peace and democratization process.
Here in Britain, well, 2016, we had 4 or 5 unions signing up to a Freedom for Öcalan campaign, please. We have now the support of the TUC and millions of workers in Europe. I don't think we are not that bad off, actually. I feel a certain, skepticism and sort of being a little bit worried. I would say it's a good time. I would say it's a good time because the Kurds are prepared to take it all the way to challenge the system, to challenge the whole ways we are thinking, it's challenge the whole way we are moving by taking their own struggle, worldwide, giving their lives for it. It has to be understood really in that human sense. It is that desperate. It is that desperate. And, and people, if we say, for example, how do we deal with the state here? I don't think a solution in making parliamentary meetings sometimes, or even appealing to those people who think they will help. Because the question is to win the broader public who will support the Kurds. And how do we do that? It's certainly not going through parliament, where there is a systemic breakdown, where we see all the parties disintegrating. What is Jeremy Corbyn going to do? He has been with the movement. He's a prime example. He has supported the Kurds, I can think. 86, I met him first time. 86. And now we are at a stage where he cannot even speak out. On the hunger strikers, what situation is this politically? So in fact, is the question turning out to the public? How can we do that? We can get people involved. And we have proved it that we can do on the women front, on every front. It just needs to be more people, of course. But I think if we are consistently doing that, there's the chance. People around the corner that I know for many years in my next door shop, they ask for the Kurds. They say, what are these Kurds? This is fascinating. You know, I mean, there is more outside support. We just don't have the structures or the capabilities to mobilize people. We can get the support, despite everybody. We were in Parliament in July 2016, and we put Öcalan on the stage of British history against everybody.